Okay, awesome. So today, if you guys don't already know, today I wanted to talk about values that serve you versus values that steal from you. And what I mean by that is kind of noticing the things in our life that end up being energy drains and things that end up being that fill us with energy. And I think one of the things I talk about a lot, we talk about Be the Hero a lot, we talk about our YouTube channel a lot, is most everything that we do in our life is actually fueled by a different value. And those values end up kind of falling into either intrinsic values or extrinsic values. And we like to say that even though there's not such a thing as bad values, extrinsic values tend to steal from us and they drain us and they don't make us feel good. So I'm going to be talking about how to kind of identify those extrinsic values that might be playing out that we're not necessarily noticing. And how to kind of shift them into intrinsic values. And I'm going to also kind of talk about how our Enneagram, if we already know what our Enneagram personality type is, how it can kind of just be a quick indicator into which extrinsic values we tend to fall into more easily and faster. And that's kind of our default. And how we can more easily just shift it into the more natural intrinsic value that kind of goes with our Enneagram. So I'll just do, I have a few slides to share with you guys, but at the end I'll open it up so you guys can ask questions and like talk about some, questions and concerns that you have in your life. If you guys have any questions before I get started, let me know. You're welcome to unmute yourself or let me know in the chat if you'd prefer to not talk on the Zoom call. Oops. Almost there. Okay. Can you guys see the screen? Yes, perfect. Okay, awesome. Okay, so one of the things to start with before we dive into like the intrinsic values versus the extrinsic values is to kind of tune in for a sec. And I'll give you guys a minute to like kind of sit in silence in this, but kind of like tune in into your past day or maybe your past week and think about kind of some of the biggest stressors in your life. Maybe it's minute, maybe it comes out as anxiety for you, just a little bit of worry that you bring when you go to sleep at night, or maybe you wake up in the morning and you're immediately thinking of something that, I got to handle this thing right now. What are those things? And kind of, you can make note of them, you can just take mental note of them. But what are those things in your life that are kind of feeling like they're stealing from you, they're taking away from you? I'm going to give you guys a few seconds just to think about that. And if you kind of thought about those things for a second, I want you to also think about what things in your life have given you energy over the past week. And it could be something really small. It could have been like a conversation with someone. It could have been this small thing that you did for yourself, whether that was you cooked yourself a healthy meal that it's kind of hard for you to make that effort to take care of yourself, to do the right things for your health and for your wellness and for your happiness. What is one small thing that has served you? And once you guys have kind of thought about those things, if it's great if you took note of them, because those are going to come back later into your values, whether they're extrinsic or whether they're intrinsic. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is most of the time when we talk about extrinsic values or intrinsic values, it ends up coming down to kind of the split between whether it's being driven by our actions are being driven by ego or what we call the antithesis, which is like your soul self. Now, a lot of us, ego is a weird word because some of us we all think that the word ego is like, oh, someone who's egotistical is like full of themselves and like but everyone has an ego. I have an ego. My ego is huge. It tries to protect me. And so all of us have this ego. And this ego is the voice inside of us that kind of always tells us that I need to do more to be more. I need proof in the external material world. I need evidence that I matter and that people love me. My value is transactional. And so I need to give something to get something back. Now, the ego is not all bad because this is kind of a survival mechanism. This ego part of our brains, it keeps us alive. And so it thinks that material world, the ego developed kind of as this primal evolution. And at first, the ego used to look in the material world, and if there was predators, it kept us alive. But also the ego kind of evolved. It evolved to see the transaction of love and acceptance and validation as equivalently dangerous as a predator. And so anytime we feel that we aren't loved, or we feel that we aren't accepted, or we feel that we aren't validated, or we aren't seen, or that we aren't heard, or that we don't matter, then our egos feel that we don't matter. And that's like a survival threat to us. And so the correlation actually tends to be that when we are living by an extrinsic value, we're living by our egos. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's good. It keeps us alive. But at the same time, sometimes our ego confuses us. Our extrinsic values confuse us to think that when we get those things, those transactions, when we do something important in our careers and we get that affirmation or validation for it, when our kids are accepting of us and validate us, when our friends accept us and validate us, when people in our lives, or we have these rewards or proof that we matter, that someone tells us we did a good job and that we're important, then our egos think that that's happiness. But then at the same time, if we start to think about it, if we start to think that I have to do something, I have to prove something to then matter and to be lovable and to be worthy, then we're always victim to needing to give something first, to transact our feeling that we matter. But on the antithesis end of this is to realize that you have nothing to prove. You're already loved and seen and heard and valued. I'm already free of guilt, and I'm already enough. That's the soul self that we're trying to embrace a little more of. You have these, both of them inside of you. You're always going to have that part of you within you that knows that you're already enough. But then the ego tends to take control. And the ego tends to take control, like I'll share in the next slide, kind of because we're never taught to think about our transactional feeling that we are matter, that we are enough. We kind of end up growing up in this society, in the world. The world tells us that you do have to prove that you're enough. They have to prove that you're enough for your parents, you're enough for your kids, that you're enough for your friends, that you're enough for your partners and your relationships. But what if we shifted that and started to come from a space of knowing that you're already enough, and you're already worthy, and you're already important? And how can we stop living our lives constantly trying to prove first? It's okay to absolutely engage in your life and have that sense of trying to give. That's so great and important. And we're never going to be like totally rid of that. But we want to be able to step into the soul self where we know that we're enough first, because then we're not going to constantly feel obligated to doing things that steal our energy, because we want to have energy, right? We want to be not draining our energy constantly. We're waking up in the morning and thinking, oh, I got to deal with these things that are stealing my energy, like these conflicts, whether that's with people, whether that's at my job, whether that's with, my extended relationships. So stepping into your soul self is how you do that. And really quickly, I'm just going to cover the bullet points that I kind of already said, but when we're in our egos and when we're in our bad values, we kind of see everything through the lens of we're either good or bad as people. We judge ourselves. And so when we have something, a bad value, such as like approval, then either we are approved and we are good. We are good people. And we criticize ourselves, almost having that inner critic within us that we say, oh, I'm approved, therefore I am good and I am worthy. But if we don't get that approval, and we did all we could to get that approval, and all of a sudden our ego is now judging us and saying, you are bad, you are not worthy, you are not enough. And of course, that kind of applies to any sort of extrinsic value where we're hoping that we're going to do something to get something back. And if we don't get back what we're hoping to get, it's either black or white. We're rewarded or we're punished. And the ego is going to kind of stay in control like this by default because of, we've shared this in other videos in Be the Hero, so I'm not going to go into it in detail, but we have this negativity bias where we want to hold on to negative memories, want to hold on to negative views about ourselves because we think it's a survival mechanism. But then it keeps us stuck in that feeling of stealing our energy, not happiness. On the other hand, if we step into those intrinsic values and know that we're already seen and loved and heard and valued, then we can start to step into a sense of equanimity. Equanimity is seeing that things are not black and white. This is all a lesson and I'm learning through this. And maybe sometimes we do have to go through hard things. Equanimity is not saying that we're not going to go through hard things, but sometimes hard things, we say, hey, this is great that I'm going through this hard thing. Looking back at it, when I get through this hard thing, it's going to be great. And that's what happens when we step into intrinsic values, is what's going to help us get to that process, to that result of being able to have that almost neutrality a little bit. So one quick thing I wanted to talk about is how having this extrinsic values ruling your life is really not your fault. It's like a default brain mechanism, and it's also passed on generation through generation. And so the extrinsic values that you're probably living your life in were handed to you because nobody taught you how to choose your intrinsic values. And that's why you're here right now. You get to choose them. You can choose them right now. You can choose them tomorrow. You can choose them. You can change them every day. But being able to step in and choose that is the most important step, because what happens in Melissa, you probably know, we talked about this in our last one about pineal gland, how we have that chakra hijack. And so if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, I'm not going to go into it in detail, but you can watch the replay for the last one about the chakra hijack in our last webinar. But basically what happens is we have your parents had extrinsic values, and they have this transactional form of, they had to do something for their kids to prove to themselves that their kids love them, which is you. And so that kind of gets passed down. And so now you as a child probably had this same feeling of, I needed to do something for my family unit in order to prove that I am worthy, and I'm enough. I deserve love from my parents. And this is very subconscious. It might not be like, oh yes, totally. But this is what happens on a deeper emotional level between that age of 0 to 14. So maybe for you, if you have quite a bit of a mindfulness practice and you've maybe looked into your Enneagram a lot, you might kind of already know what that is. If not, that might be something that could be helpful for you to just think about when you're in meditation, think about when you're wake up in the morning, what is my feeling that I need to do to prove to my loved ones in my life that I'm enough? And so this is kind of where it ties into the Enneagram. There generally tends to be about 9 different core beliefs that we think we need to do to prove that we deserve love. And I'll kind of like go over them real quick. So like the type 1 feels that it needs to be absolutely perfect to parents, to peers, to loved ones, to prove that they deserve love. A type 2 feels like they need to serve. They need to be the most helpful person to prove that they deserve love. The type 3 feels that they need to achieve and be the best to prove they deserve love. The type 4 needs to prove that they are unique and different and special in order to prove that they matter. The type 5 needs to be capable and competent. Type 6 needs to show to the world that I'm the most loyal person. And if I am loyal to you, then I deserve love. The type 7 needs to be fun, and I need to keep things positive for the people around me. And if I do, then I deserve love. The type 8, they need to be competent and they need to be the challenger. They need to show that they will push farther than other people to show that to prove to the world that they deserve love. And the type 9 wants to create harmony for the people in their life, the loved ones. If I can maintain harmony for my loved ones, then I deserve love. So if you know your Enneagram, hopefully one of those sticks. If you don't, maybe that could help you figure out and really dial in on what your Enneagram is. And basically what happens from then is that obviously that belief kind of dominates our subconscious for a long time by default, unless we step in and notice it. It ends up influencing our chakras because all of that belief that we have based on our Enneagram tends to, it creates a thought, beliefs create thought, And every thought that you have creates a feeling in your body. Thought is energy, and then it signals a certain region of your body. And then it either shuts down a chakra or it opens it up and makes it overactive. And now we have literally, it influences our health because thought is energy. Energy communicates to the cells in our body. And then these cells are literally the manifestation of our being. And so it either upregulates certain hormones, downregulates certain hormones. And I'm not going to go into in detail, but the point is that this cycle of our extrinsic values based on essentially our Enneagram kind of has a big influence on our physical health, on our actual wellness in this physical body. So some of the values you can kind of think about if you're having trouble like noticing, well, I'm not quite sure how to pinpoint what is the extrinsic value, what are the intrinsic values. I just kind of made a quick list. Obviously, there's so many words that we could use to distinguish intrinsic values or extrinsic values. But on the left here, those are kind of some of the core examples of extrinsic values. And on the right, those are some intrinsic values. The basic gist of it is that extrinsic values are things that are not within your power. So acceptance, is that in your power to decide whether someone else accepts you? Well, someone else accepting you. Can you have self-acceptance? Yeah, you can have to ask a question, Melissa.
Is the slide supposed to change?
Oh, it didn't change. Let's see.
No.
Thank you.
There we go. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so self-acceptance, for example, though, could be an intrinsic value. So like words are kind of, a basic summary, but thinking about the things you do in your life. So kind of refer back to that note if you wrote down those things when we started this. What are the conflicts that came up for you? What are some of those struggles that came up? And do they kind of fall into some of these things? And it's totally okay to have a level of honesty with yourself. Like, for example, I wake up in the morning and I go and I say, oh man, I don't want to admit this to myself because it makes me feel like I'm a bad person. But yes, I was stressed this morning because I have, as an Enneagram 3 myself, I tend to have the bad extrinsic value of achievement. I believe I have to achieve, be the best in order to get that transactional worthiness that I matter, that I'm loved. And so if I wake up in the morning and I say, oh, I got to do all these things on my to-do list, I got to get to work and I need to start working. And I was telling my mom the other day that I'm like, I'm just overwhelmed because I feel like I'm never doing enough. And so that was a big, for as long as I practice mindfulness, I'm constantly still victim to my programming, to my Enneagram, and that's okay. All that matters is that you're stepping in and you're noticing it, and then you make the active effort to choose to not be victim to that automatic default. So when I wake up in the morning and I'm thinking about, oh, I have so much to do, I can step in and go, well, that was my anxiety. And which extrinsic value is it coming from? Probably achievement, the feeling that I need to achieve to then be enough. Instead, maybe I can choose one of my 5 to 10 core values on the intrinsic side. Can I come from a place of, my favorite one is, I didn't put it here, I don't think, but personal power or competence. Those are two that obviously you could see them from an extrinsic standpoint. But if I wake up and I go, well, I just want to see what I'm capable of. Now that's all within my power. I can wake up and do my absolute best. And if I do my absolute best, that's all within my control. I can feel that sense of energy expansion because I did do my best. I fulfilled what I was hoping to achieve. So I'm going to give you guys just a few minutes to overview this without me distracting you with talking. And if you wrote down the notes, kind of refer back to them and see if you can notice what they're associated with. Okay, so if you got to overview that really quick, and if you didn't get enough time to think about that, in Be the Hero, there's a workbook where you get there's a workbook to like journal through these things, and you'll have a whole list of values to reflect on, and there's prompts in the journaling that you can use to help you and encourage you to figure out what core extrinsic values are influencing your life, and how just some helpful steps to be able to identify that. I kind of covered this already, but there tends to be 1 to 2 core bad values that we get addicted to. And so like I just shared in my story, I tend to get addicted to the bad values of achievement and acceptance. And I think there's a level of everyone kind of falls into some version of either acceptance or validation or approval, because we're social beings. You can't survive without some level of social acceptance and social validation and being seen and heard by the people around you in your life. But it's important to notice which of those core ones that you get addicted to, because it can be very helpful in kind of redirecting your path by knowing what they are generally. So basically, it's kind of having this sticky note. By knowing the 1 to 2 core values that you tend to get addicted to, it's kind of like keeping this constant sticky note where you can go, oh, am I living by these 2 values? Oh, there I go again. And instead of having to go through the entire thought process of, I wonder which extrinsic value am I living my life by right now? If you have those 1 to 2 kind of in mind, then it's a little bit easier to catch them as they come up and redirect them into positive core intrinsic values. If you know your Enneagram, like I said, it's easy to know your bad value. I will link in Be the Hero. When I post this replay, I'll post it all as one post, and then I'll send you guys direct links to that post so that you can find it easily. But in that, I have a course where I talked about what value you have based on your Enneagram. It's a short video, so if you want to just look at that and see like, oh, let me just go see, I know my Enneagram, which value 1 to 2 core bad values I get addicted to based on my Enneagram, you can just check out that link and go watch that YouTube video. But again, there's more you can go into in that post that I'll post with this replay. So where do you start with this in noticing your bad value, your good value? The first thing you're going to do is know your Enneagram. But at the end of the day, I think one of the best things that you could do is just do a very, very quick value check-in. And a value check-in is kind of what I covered already, but it's a little bit more of a sense of having this daily accountability, and it doesn't have to be written. That's why I put here, you're going to think or write about the main conflicts or events that came up in your day. And I think this is a good habit, and you don't, like I said, you don't have to write it down if that doesn't work for you. But sometimes if we're not writing it down, then we're not accountable to actually doing it. But if you can go to finish your day and you can think about the main things that happened in your day, and I said main events because it doesn't have to be conflicts. Think about all the good things and all the bad things that happened in your day. It can just be small. Like there's this one main conflict that happened, and then there was these like 2 little good things that happened. And trying to notice in those events, well, was I happy or was I sad from them because they were extrinsic? What result was I hoping for? Was I in conversation with, my partner, and is this conversation a good conversation? Did it end well for you? And did it end well for you because you got the result you wanted transactionally? So this is a hard level of honesty, but were you in that conversation? Maybe you're hoping for approval from your partner. Were you hoping to have this conversation and have some level of, I was hoping that they were going to say like this, and they did say that. And that's great that it was a positive experience, but also having a level of mindfulness about, well, I was still coming from an extrinsic value. It's totally okay. We're all human to have extrinsic and intrinsic values working throughout our life. All we want to do is be able to instill a little bit more of our intrinsic values into our day so that we're filling our tank with energy instead of constantly just depleting. So think about the main events that happened in your day and consider both sides. Consider was this coming from intrinsic value, or could have this been coming from an extrinsic value? And then think about if you were coming from an extrinsic value, if you were able to kind of identify that, what would it have looked like for me to have approached that event from intrinsic values instead? What would it have, just think about it. That way you can start to understand what behavior on your part what it would look like for you to be acting from an intrinsic value. Because I think that can sometimes be overwhelming, right? Like to think like, well, okay, values, these are like something they're not tangible. It's not a behavior. It's not like me saying a certain line of dialogue. It's not me doing a certain task at work. So instead, we have to kind of come up with the solutions for ourselves. As an Enneagram 3, for example, if I'm finished my day and I go, oh man, that was ridiculous of me to give myself a headache because I stressed myself to death because they thought I needed to work more, to be more, to prove that I was enough. Instead, I can take that and I can notice that that extrinsic value event that I did, and I say, okay, well, what would it have looked like instead? And sometimes it's not super easy, tangible tasks. Because if I were to try to shift what that would have looked like, what that looks like for me, I would go and I would say, well, I would need to breathe when I'm working more often. I would need to work and I would need to check in every maybe 30 minutes and say, hey, do you believe that you're already doing enough? If I just checked in with that question, maybe I would relax my shoulders. Maybe I would just breathe a little deeper and say, I'm already enough. And so maybe for you, not as an Enneagram 3, maybe, as an Enneagram 2, if you're running around stressed, trying to do everything for everyone, maybe that looks like checking in every hour or so and say, maybe I'm already enough for everyone. Maybe I already deserve love exactly as I am. And I'm doing my best for the people around me. And it is already enough. I'm constantly going to try to help and serve, but maybe I'm already lovable exactly as I am. And maybe just that little dialogue is enough for you to shift into your intrinsic values. Maybe it's not a huge shift in your tasks. On the other hand, sometimes if we're like caught up in, busy lives and routines, and we have to be at work and we have to take care of our kids and all these things, maybe there are certain obligations in our schedule that are more tangible task-like steps. Maybe we can say no to certain obligations. Are we obligated to certain friendships or social groups in our lives, or I don't know, different activities like kids sports? Maybe are these coming from intrinsic values or extrinsic values? Am I obligated to that thing that I'm going to go do because it truly energizes me, or am I doing it from a place of, well, I feel like I need to show up at this social event because I need to, I need to get the validation from this social group? And again, it's totally okay, like, to have that small sense of yearning for that acceptance, or affirmation, validation. But if it's stealing from you, that's when we need to check in and go, okay, maybe I actually need to put up a boundary and say no to this and come from my intrinsic value instead and be like, I really need to focus on my self-care. I need to focus on my inner peace. I need to focus on my own self-acceptance. Maybe self-acceptance for me would look like staying at home and being whoever I want to be instead of showing up and having to be who other people want me to be. So that kind of covers everything that I wanted to go as an overview. If you guys have any questions, you're welcome to open it up now. Again, this is just a picture that I'm going to share the workbook if you want to do it, if you'd rather not have to kind of just think through the values thought process. There's a workbook to go with it, and it's in Be the Hero Academy. You can get access to it.